first time here in Bangor, so I'm loving it. I'm living life.
What do you think of Bangor so far?
So far, I've been told about Stephen King, I think, 472 times. So apparently there's some Stephen King history here.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't actually live here, though, which makes it weird that that's all you've heard about.
I know. It was literally, I hopped in my cab on the way in, and he told me all of these places to go. It sounds exciting. I can't wait to see The Great from it, but I haven't made it out there yet. Hopefully, there's time left in the day.
Plenty of time, for sure. I know your work on The Daily Show. I love your work on The Daily Show. Tell me the first time you saw The Daily Show and sort of what your thought was on it.
I was a fan of The Daily Show back in the Craig Kilborn days.
Wow. OG.
I loved Kilborn from ESPN. I thought he was so funny. This big, tall, lanky guy who can be sarcastic. I think I was like, there's something in this guy. Something in this guy that I like. And I remember watching it after school, thinking it was so funny, the 5 questions thing. Fast forward into college a couple years later, and Jon Stewart was this guy that, we would go to. We had no interest necessarily in politics. As a college kid, I had an only interest in myself and the Wu-Tang Clan. But then I got to watch Jon sort of make it palatable, interesting, and thoughtful, and I kind of refound that fandom yet again.
So I remember the first time I went to see The Daily Show when Jon Stewart was hosting. I never saw it with Kilborn, and I remember the security guard. I was a Jon Stewart fan. I loved the fact that he took it over. I loved Kilborn too, but I was just so excited about Stewart. And the security guard outside said, well, the ratings are starting to build back up from where Kilborn was, but I don't think we're ever going to pass it.
Well, I don't know if that guy's still there anymore. Those pessimistic security guards from the early 2000s. It was the show showed a remarkable amount of resiliency, both with changes, with Jon taking over and really giving it a very specific voice, and then Trevor came on, and I was a part of that as well, and Trevor found his voice, and then we've had so many rotating hosts. I've gotten to do it. Jon's come back, and so I think what we've grown accustomed to is the show is about change, and I think we have such a good enough team there that we sort of know how to make that vehicle work for any time.
It's the best damn news team on television.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Jon Stewart is very much a creative genius in my mind. You cite Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and Trevor Noah as some of your influences in comedy. What is it like?
Wikipedia does. You've done the Wikipedia. I mean, I think Trevor did that Wikipedia. To be clear.
So who are the influences on comedy then?
Well, truly, Jon, Stephen, and Trevor are huge influences. I have to say that.
You made me feel like a jerk, and they're actually the influences? Come on.
They are some of the influences. I grew up a Chicago nerd, though, so I loved sketch comedy. Key and Peele was a big influence, but even going way back to The State, Kids in the Hall, Monty Python, those were the things that got me into comedy in the first place. And then I will say I fell in love with Jon's perspective and Stephen's characters in early Daily Show that really, when I got that job, that was, they sort of were the groundwork. Obviously Jon as the host, but also Stephen sort of created what the modern correspondent was.
So was Wikipedia correct in that you did Second City?
Wikipedia was correct. Yes,
okay.
I did.
Good. And so Colbert has a history there as well. How much of Second City influences what you do now?
Well, I will say Improv is a big influence on me. I did Second City and the Improv Olympic, and it's all about brainstorming, being fearless, and listening. And I would say the field work that I do when I go to rallies, that's my improv training. You're listening to people. You're essentially improvising a scene with somebody else, an unwitting scene partner. And then when you come back to The Daily Show, the first half of working at The Daily Show is an improviser's brain. You're brainstorming. You have to say yes to ideas. You have to create quickly. The second half of that day is a stand-up's brain. You have to start editing. You have to make things funnier. You have to be specific with your intention. So I definitely use the Second City and the Improv Olympic every day.
The field pieces that you do, I don't know you well, but I feel like you won't be offended if I say they take incredible nuts. I don't know how you do it, and I know that the training is improv, but how do you do it? Do you get the butterflies before you go? Do you ever get nervous about it, or is it just you're digging in, you're right, you're funny, so you're just going?
Well, it's kind of you to think that I'm both right and funny. I think that's just the unbridled confidence that may be unearned, but it gets you out the door. I approach it with a generous amount of curiosity. I truly want to know what people are thinking, what propaganda we see back at home, how it manifests out in the field. And so I do truly love that part of it all. It can get dicey. I can get nervous about some dicey situations, but above all else, I find it kind of exhilarating and fun just to actually talk to people and not just sit behind a desk all day.
Speaking of sitting behind a desk, you mentioned you filled in as anchor. There's a rotating crop of anchors. You also had the opposition. What do you enjoy doing more? Do you enjoy the field pieces more? Do you enjoy hosting more?
I like doing both. I mean, the field is a wonderful place to be, but it's hard to pass up getting dressed in a beautiful suit in an air-conditioned studio in front of an audience who's told to laugh at your jokes. That's nice. That is a great way to end the day. And sometimes when you spend 1,000 days in the middle of Pennsylvania in the cold just trying to talk to people about whether or not JFK Jr. is alive, you start thinking about how nice it is to be in the studio back at the Daily Show. So right now I like that I get to do a little bit of both.
Have you ever had a field piece that's just started going so south, you start questioning whether or not you should keep going, to just hop on the plane, go back?
Well, I was doing one field piece in Washington, D.C., and an insurrection broke out. So that happens occasionally. But then you stick in it, you stay in it, you find a good piece, and then years later, all those people are heroes, apparently. So you let history take its course.
I feel like there is a significant skill set that goes along with turning hardships and tragedy into comedy, and you all do it so well. Do you ever feel like you cross that line, though, where you say, gosh, this is just like the insurrection. This is just awful. How do we laugh at this? I think through humor we often find connection or catharsis, and there are those things that are we are a news show that covers things, or we're a comedy show that covers the news, and so when there's something like a school shooting, we talk about that. And I don't think comedy is not always the best way to approach every topic, but also it can be a cathartic way. I think with the opposition, I remember we had multiple weeks where there were multiple school shootings, and it almost felt inappropriate to not comment on it. The world we were living in was being surrounded by these events, and we were affected by it. And so the work of that day was for us to find the absurdity and find the humor, so there was sort of like a valve to let that energy out, and I think we found it. I remember one of those days that you find out what is your target, for lack of a better term, of satire, and at that day it was the fact that we can't change the narrative here. We found the humor in literally sifting through newspapers, trying to find the day's newspapers that all had shootings on them, and we couldn't find it because it kept happening over and over and over again. And I think those difficult times, like, you're in a room with a lot of smart people, but hopefully if you could find some ways to at least articulate what everyone's feeling, I think that's comedy, and that's good writing, that's art at its best. You have a conversation with Jordan Klepper at the Cross Insurance Center, part of the Hollywood Casino Ballroom series.
Was he here?
Yes.
Yes.
Right here.
I'm very excited.
Right here.
Very excited.
So what is the thing that drives you? What is the thing that keeps you going to keep doing events like this?
Well, I just toured the country doing sort of a solo show this past year, and it was a chaotic year. There's a big election, and everybody is exhausted. So when I started to look at what I want to do this year, I love being out on the road, and I do love just talking to people. There was a big part of my last show that involved just getting down and talking to audiences, and every place I went had a different perspective, different things they were nervous about, different things they were excited about, and it felt like I wanted to kick off this new year with conversations. And so that's what this is. I'm going to talk with Molly about comedy, about satire, about all things. I'm going to open it up to the people of Maine to be like, what do you guys care about? Do I have any insight on it? Who knows? But I'd love to have some of that conversation. I think that might be a nice, healthy way to begin this new chaotic time we're in.
It's exciting. People are very excited about it. Of course, if you're watching on TV, it happened last night. But the next time it comes around, you won't want to miss it. I do want to ask you one more thing. Our good friend of our show, Marc Summers, that's how we got connected. Mm-hmm. How do you know Marc?
Well, how do you not know Marc Summers? I grew up a fan of Marc Summers on Double Dare, and fast forward years later, he reached out to me on Instagram after a video that I did, and it blew my mind that this person I grew up on reached out to me, and we kind of connected, and we've stayed in touch a little bit over the time, over the last few years, and I was even telling you before this that he came to one of my hosting nights at The Daily Show, and it was sort of a surreal moment to watch this person who, literally one of the first hosts I ever saw. I grew up watching him host these wonderful shows, narrate part of my childhood, and he got to see me do one of my dreams sitting behind the desk at The Daily Show, and it really was a sweet thing. So Marc Summers, put him up there in the Hall of Fame.